"Oh," said someone else in a disappointed voice. "I was hoping for a nice bright pink." "For a nice bright pink, I'm afraid you need to go to the aniline dyes, chemical dyes. Natural dyes tend to be softer in color." "But wasn't there a red dye back in the 18th century?" asked another woman. "The British used it on their soldiers' uniforms. That's why they're called redcoats, right? And that was before aniline dyes." "There is a natural dye that gives a true red, but it comes from an insect found on Mexican cactus plants, cochineal. It was a very expensive dye, still is, in fact. The British were showing off, using it for ordinary soldiers' uniforms. The closest red you'll get from a vegetable dye is orange. There is actually a local flower that will give you a nice, rich orange when mordanted in tin, but it isn't fast. It fades in sunlight and after a couple of washings." "What flower is that?" asked the woman. "A new variety of marigold. You'll probably notice when we dye our samples that the wool mordanted in tin gives us the brightest color." Also on the table was a low stack of fabric cut into 4-inch squares, each with 5 short lengths of white yarn slip-knotted through the slits cut down one side. Beside each slip of yarn was printed on the fabric with permanent marker, alum, copper, iron, tin, and none. Hailey picked up the squares, counted the number of people present, including herself, and pulled a dozen squares off the stack. Setting them aside, she lifted the strainer off the big pot and dumped the flowers into a wastebasket lined with a plastic bag, then poured the liquid back into the pot and returned it to the burner. "Now let's try dyeing some of our wool." She took the dozen squares and dropped them into the pot, poking at them with the dowel. She checked her watch, and half the members of her audience checked theirs too. "We'll give it 5 minutes," she said. Meanwhile, she lifted the kettle off the hot plate and poured its steaming contents into a stainless steel dishpan. "Rinse water," she explained. She reached under the table and came up with the twin to the pot currently holding the squares. "Betsy, could you fill this about halfway with hot water?" "Certainly," said Betsy, taking the pot with her into the back room, where, having been forewarned, she had earlier filled the electric tea kettle.